there's so many people who are still confused, still going along with this capitalist imperialist system instead of revolting is because of the sheep herders, the weak United States left. The lack of revolutionary discipline that we have is led to them is because they led us off a cliff. Bernie Sanders, a lot of the progressives, they take otherwise anti-establishment energy and they funnel it back to the Democratic Party. What we have in as a left is straight up embarrassing, right? And Bernie Sanders, AOC, and the squad, they have their supporters so whipped that they don't even feel the need to give an explanation on why they voted for the $40 billion in Ukraine aid. That is something that should immediately disqualify them in any conversations about them being an ally, on top of everything else. So before we start the segment, and Josana always tells me this all the time, like it's 100% fair to criticize Lula. Lula has some improvements that he could do as well, right? But I want to show you guys the state of the United States left, to the point where if you look at where Lula stands on these issues, and when you see how the squad and Bernie Sanders get these things completely wrong, you can see why the United States left is in the state that it is right now. And when I say that I view someone on the left, if they are anti-capitalist and if they are anti-imperialist, we don't even get that from the squad and Bernie Sanders. So let's go to the first bullet point, the one I just mentioned. Anyone who believes Bernie Sanders and the squad are on our side after siding with NATO, an offensive imperialist force that has spent a lot of its resources crushing the left, Bernie Sanders and the squad joined with NATO. Now, this is what you guys know what Lula's position is? I'm going to show you guys Lula. And now compare Bernie Sanders voting for $40 billion to Ukraine and essentially repeating U.S. empire talking points. And this is how every single progressive who had the balls to talk about this has presented this issue. Meanwhile, look at how RBN and our allies have been covering this issue, even compared to the boutique leftists. There are so many boutique left, like Bosch, like the Majority Report, like TYT. Like Cenk Uygur said, we need to fund this proxy war more. He was like, think about the gay people in Russia. Think about the women. So we came along, we're like, guys, let me explain to you guys the black radical position. And this position is not hard to take. It is very basic anti-imperialism, which identifies imperialism as a giant economic order that must be opposed. Once again, Lula is not perfect. But I wish we could have a left that is at least where Lula is at. If we had a left where Lula is at, then I'm like, okay, let's push them. Let's fight. Let's try to get them on our side. Bernie Sanders, AOC, and squad and them is nowhere near that. And by the time this video is done, you guys will know exactly what I'm talking about.
But that's not the problem. Is like, if Lula was born and raised in the USA, he would probably be a sellout as well. In my perspective, I was, me, Nick, you know how radical I am, how far left from Lula I am, right? Yep. So like I criticize Lula every day, but to be quite honest, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get my ass to the embassy in October and vote for him, because in my country, one person, one vote. So one unity, 1 point. Okay? Another thing, I want to have the right to be opposition to Lula. I want to have the right to sit here and tell you, Nick, this bitch is doing this and that. I hate his ass. I want to be able to do that, because in dictatorial governments, we do not have the right to do that. With a fascist dictator like Bolsonaro, people are dying. Marielle Franco died. It's clear. I get too passionate because Marielle is an entity. With Marielle Franco, a black queer woman from the slums. And we're going to use favela because favela is a bit different from slums. She was a congresswoman in Rio de Janeiro. Her last speech, the day she died, is facing her assassin. Bolsonaro was the person that ordered the murder of her. And nothing happened to him. Everybody knows in the country, and everybody's quiet about it. So, to be quite honest, no, Lula needs to be my candidate and my hero, my daddy. He needs to be way far left than what he is right now. But he can be my uncle, because he can be my tio, because I actually like to have the right to be free, really free. Not risking my life because I'm sitting on YouTube and talking, not having to leave the YouTube stream to go to fucking work like a fucking slave. No, that's no freedom in that. Just so I can sit here and be like, oh, I read this and that, and this is my point of view. Yo, in the USA, you love to see yourselves as the brain of the world because that's all you have. You need to be more heartful because you've been given nothing and you've been accepting it.
And what Josana laid out in terms of, this is what I was saying as well. Like, if we have someone like Lula, you can push, like, yeah, we gotta continue to call him out, and we gotta challenge him every step of the way. Even if, and this is the debate that we've been having, like, should we have a leader in the movement or should we have a leaderless movement? Okay, if we do have a leader in the movement, we gotta be smart. We gotta be wise in how we have a leader in the movement. So when we represent the movement itself, we're like, yeah, we got this guy who represents these ideas. The idea itself is bigger than the movement, right? And then if Lula strays, if there's any things that we disagree on, like there are a lot of people on the left in Brazil, and maybe Josiah can speak on it more. Lula get challenged a lot on his climate proposals, right? Because Lula is more of a drill kind of person. Like there's a disagreement between a lot of leftists and Lula on that, and that's something we got to challenge him on. But this is my thing: the people who say, "Oh, we got to push Bernie and the squad," they are too far gone. What I mean by that, if you're an imperialist, if you are apologizing for the U.S. empire capitalist system, you are too far gone. There's too much work to be done there. So if you're someone like Lula, and you're at least anti-imperialist, if you're at least anti-U.S. empire, like Bolsonaro, and you can always correct me if I'm wrong here, but Bolsonaro was supporting the coup in Venezuela. He was a big supporter of Juan Guaido, and he sent mercenary death squads.
Bolsonaro was baptized in Israel.
I didn't know that.
And he won the election right after. So he went to Israel to be baptized, a Zionist.
So Bolsonaro supports Juan Guaido. And Lula is famous, and he recently gave a speech where he criticized the United States and the hypocrisy of the West. Where he was like, oh, you guys are saying that Russia is not a democracy. You guys are talking about country sovereignty, but you get in the way of Venezuela and their sovereignty and knowing Juan Guaido. So, and now, once again, we comparing the issues here. Compare that to AOC literally following Juan Guaido. And then she says, I'm going to defer this issue to caucus leadership. So that's a very smart, like, political thing by AOC, because when she says that, she's literally saying she supports the U.S. empire overthrowing Venezuela, but she said, I defer to caucus leadership, so she doesn't say it outright. So when you say you defer to caucus leadership is Nancy Pelosi. So you're saying you agree with the empire.
Mm-hmm.
You see how slick she is? That was her way of saying that she supports Juan Guaido without actually saying it. Because she was asked about it, she was like, "Oh, well, I defer to caucus leadership." If she was being really honest, she would say, "Yo, I do support Juan Guaido." She follows him on Twitter, and she supports Nancy Pelosi's position, which is overthrowing Venezuela, right? I'm gonna get to that comment here after I finish thought, but you see the difference because Bernie Sanders quiet on that issue. Yeah. If anything, his neutrality shows his support. Like Bernie and AOC and the squad, they all for it. But Lula has been actively calling that out. So let me read this comment, and then you can comment on it, Josana, as well. Lula needs to purge every corrupt right wing within the Brazilian government as well as the Brazilian military, so another coup doesn't happen again. Josana, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I just want to say that I don't agree with that. I agree with having the right to do so, but I don't think this is the idea that I want to deconstruct in the head of my fellow relatives from the north. Because we want you in that Pan American bus. We need to deconstruct the idea that one man is going to go in there and save everybody. We need to believe and support that man, hold that man accountable, work with them, work against them. It's an environment, it's a society, it's a group, it's a community. To coexist is not the work of one. Get the idea of the white Jesus out of your head. White Christianity condenses us in a system that is dominant and makes us think that we are powerless because we depend on the hero to do so. It's not just I'm going to vote for him and sit here and be like, yeah, good. I'm going to vote for him and hold his ass accountable every single day. I will be the voice he hates the most.
Yeah, that's how it should be done. Like people, like I remember the progressive people who were like, oh my God, Nick betrayed us. They couldn't believe I started criticizing Bernie and AOC because you guys know I did work on the Bernie campaign, right? There's so many people. We had a hard divorce. Whereas like I started criticizing the people that I can't believe it. And I'm like, they're like, why are you criticizing Bernie and AOC? Of course I would criticize them. Those are the people who I granted power with my organizing power. The people who you grant power, the people who's on your side is the people you need to be criticizing the most. That's the same way that's the same reason why I started going after the Democrats the most, because I voted for Obama in 2012. So I'm like, okay, after that, I only gotta make sure that no one else make that same mistake. And then I supported the progressives. So I'm like, okay, I fucked up there, and I'm explaining to you guys why I was wrong. You gotta hold these people accountable, right? There's some people just shocked by that. And it's crazy, right, Josana? In our culture, it's completely different. In our culture, it's like if you support this side, you gotta spend all your time criticizing the other side. What sense does that make? You're already forming a coalition to defeat that other side. So the best thing you can do is make sure your coalition is strong. So when you guys take over, you guys can maintain your principle, your integrity. So you guys actually can get something done. And then when that happens, you will build your support, right? So the idea that what we have, where you just I would never criticize my side, never criticize the people I grant power. That doesn't even make sense. That doesn't even make sense. That's the only way you can go about this. Now, I want to get to the article, right? And then, because I want you guys to compare what Lula says about this situation compared to Bernie, compared to AOC, who voted for the $40 billion. They voted for it. I wouldn't say what they say, but they're not even giving you an explanation. They give you a middle finger. They said, we give you all your money away. We're going to rob from the American people. One of the greatest heists of all time done by the West and NATO. All this weapon about to go on the black market. All this money about to be funneled into oligarchs that are friendly with the West. That is where this money is going to go. So let's read this article so we all know what the U.S. progressive position is. That's why I titled this video the way I did. Despite all the criticism that we are open to hearing about Lula, I am open. I'm still learning about him. Josana has a ton of criticism about Lula, right? Despite everything that you guys know about Lula, compare his statements to what Bernie Sanders and what AOC and them are saying. Look how far to the right Bernie and AOC and our progressives are compared to Lula. Lula makes Bernie Sanders look like Ronald Reagan, and I say that even with all the criticisms of Lula. So now let's listen to what he says so you guys know I'm not just bullshitting you. It said, here's the headline. Lula slams U.S. billions in military aid to Ukraine. Former Brazilian president criticized Biden administration for delivering billions in military assistance to Ukraine at the expense of Americans. It is not possible that President Biden, who never made a speech to give $1 for those who are dying of hunger in Africa, announces $40 billion to help Ukraine buy weapons. It is not possible. Now, as I continue to read this article, ask yourself this. Why isn't it Bernie Sanders making this argument every day? Why is it Lula? Why do we need to look overseas for someone to make this blatantly obvious observation? Nothing from Bernie, In fact, no, I wouldn't say nothing for Bernie. He's part of it. He's a part of the heist. Now I don't want you to keep it in mind. I'm gonna keep going here. I'm gonna skip a lot of the fluff here. I'm gonna get to his actual quotes. I don't like this article. I'll pull the other one. I got a few of them pulled up.
No, I just want to say, like, and you see his talking points. Lula is an adult, right? I would be like, it's wrong to send 40 billion to Nazis. Lula is like, you should not do that in the expense of your own people. A president has to take care of their people, not get their money and send to freaking Ukraine war.
So I want to put the other article up because this is like a headline. I want to show you guys what he actually says. This is a good headline, but it gives like it explains like the background of it's showing what the aid is going to. They show what the international criticism of it is, right? And he said, I'll read the tweet. This is a good tweet. He said, "To generous U.S. taxpayers, as expected to the $40 billion aid to Ukraine will be another money laundering project." That's exactly what I'm saying. Like, do people really think this $40 billion is going to help the Ukrainian people? The same thing was done in Afghanistan. Less than $10 billion will be weapons. The most will go to the friends of U.S. politicians. So, unfortunately, this article don't get into a lot of quotes, but I have a few articles saved. So, I'm gonna show you guys Lula's response to this whole crisis. Lula says Zelensky as responsible as Putin for the Ukraine war. This is literally what we've been saying. Now, check this out. Former Brazilian president said Russia should never invade Ukraine, but he believes Ukrainian President Zelensky is as much to blame for the war as Russian leader Putin. In a Time magazine interview, maybe I should find the Time interview. I just want to read the quotes. Here it is. He said, "I see the president of Ukraine speaking on television, being applauded, getting a standing ovation by all the European parliamentarians. This guy is as responsible as Putin for the war. Because in war, there is not just one person guilty." Do you? I need to find the Times article. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. I'll find a Time article because I want to get into his whole comments. Because I'll explain what he said. I'll find the transcript. Because what he was saying, he was like, if you look at the war is about the expansion of NATO. He said, why are we expanding NATO instead of advocating for peace? Why are we sending weapons instead of advocating for peace? Why you got Zelensky doing a media tour, being a celebrity instead of advocating for peace? And he blames NATO escalation for this conflict. Now compare that to Bernie. And he also said, you have them sending $40 billion in aid to Ukraine while mothers in the United States don't even have breast milk. Why do it take Lula to say this, but not our progressive politicians? Why did it take Marjorie Taylor Greene to say that instead of AOC? Now you guys see when I saw the video, even with criticism of Lula, I wish we could at least get there. I wish we could at least have a left movement in the United States that would call out NATO in the West.
And that's why I feel like the resistance, like there is a lot of, I think the more I understand the propaganda machine here and its effects in the psychological of a people, the more I feel like I need to go do some psychology degrees, but like it's so expensive. But anyways, it's so crazy to see how the propaganda machine works because it makes people proud. They are patriots. One thing we all say outside of here is like Americans are patriots, right? Like they are also like, they all like USA, USA. And they make people be proud of being mistreated, of being manipulated, of being robbed. Like the government just robbed us $40 billion.
I have this. I want to pull the whole transcript up, right? Because those articles was good, but here I want you guys to see this entire exchange. Because even when I was reading those headlines, I was like, you guys are missing the best part. The best part of the interview that he did with Times was when he was talking about the Ukraine-Russia war, And then like the reporter, because he has Putin derangement syndrome, he tries to push back at Lula. And then Lula dismantles him. He dismantles him. So I think here's where it starts. I want you guys to see this exchange. Because those headlines actually don't do enough justice. This is the question. I want to speak about the war in Ukraine. You have always prided yourself on being able to speak to everyone. Hugo Chavez as much as George Bush. But the world today is very fragmented diplomatically. I want to know if your approach still works. Could you speak to Vladimir Putin after what he's done in Ukraine? Now, for one, look at the framing of this question. You can already tell where this interviewer head is at. He's trying to get Lula to say, "Oh, I don't know if we can work with Putin," or at least condemn Putin like the West want him to do. Now he actually doesn't take the bait. So that's the context, right? Then he added, "We politicians reap what we sow. If I sow fraternity, solidarity, harmony, I'll reap good things. If I sow discord, I reap the quarrels. Putin shouldn't have invaded Ukraine, but it's not just Putin who's guilty. The U.S. and the EU are also guilty. What was the reason for Ukraine invasion? NATO? Then the U.S. and Europe would have said, U.S. and Europe should have said, Ukraine won't join NATO. That would have solved the problem." You guys see, I didn't like the other headlines because they didn't get to his full quote. Now I'm going to keep going because this guy started to push back. And look how Lula handles it. He said, "Do you think the threat of Ukraine joining NATO was Russia's real reason for invading?" Now, guys, this question is propaganda. Because I told you guys, I've been watching a lot of mainstream media, so I know what the opposition been saying. They've been framing this entire war inaccurately because they know the West is unreasonable. So whenever they talk about what Russia's demands are, even though Russia's demands from day one has always been clear, they want to stop the eastward expansion of NATO, demilitarize Ukraine, and allow the Donbass to go independent like they wanted to, which is not unreasonable. But in media, whenever they report on this, and you hear this a lot in MSNBC and CNN, they will say, "Well, Russia claims the reason why they had this war because they want to stop NATO. But is that the real reason? We actually think Putin just won a conquest." It's like, show us the evidence that that's not the Russian goal to stop the NATO encroachment. So now they asked this question. Now after he asked this part, this is when I knew that he wanted Lula to say the pro-Western narrative on this topic. But he does not take the bait. Unlike Bernie Sanders, he does not take the bait. So he said, "Do you think the threat of Ukraine joining NATO was Russia's real reason?" Repeating the mainstream media conspiracy theory that Russia is lying about that, right? Even though it's been clear from day one in the Minsk Accord and what Russian ministers have said from day one, that is a red flag, NATO and Ukraine. So Lula says that's the argument they put forward. If they have a secret one, we don't know. The other issue was Ukraine joined the EU. Europeans could have said, no, now is not the moment for Ukraine to join the EU. We'll wait. So what Lula is saying is, instead of blaming just Putin and Russia, why not just look at the West like, bro, the West could have easily stopped this by saying, "Yo, Ukraine, we can't have you in NATO. We can't have you in EU," right? Because Ukraine is functionally a NATO country. Because being a part of a NATO country is getting military support when you get invaded. They've been sent weapons after they was invaded. So all you gotta do, all you have to say is, "We can't have you part of NATO." It's just that simple. You already know you got security, but they didn't want to do that because they wanted escalation. So now let's continue the interview. I'm going a little bit long here. And this is where the reporters start repeating debunked mainstream media propaganda. And Lula is not having it. He said, "But I think they did try to speak to Russia." And Lula said, "No, they didn't. The conversations were very few. If you want peace, you have to have patience. You need to negotiate for 10, 15, 20 days, a whole month trying to find a solution. I think dialogue only works when it's taken seriously." Now remember, the context in which I'm presenting the story. Compare this to the position that the progressives in the United States have. They have full-fledged Putin derangement syndrome, where even the thought of saying that this is the West's fault, they are not having it. If you say that, you're considered a Putin puppet. a Putin sympathizer. When I said multiple times, I couldn't give a fuck about Putin. He's an anti-communist. I don't like the guy. I'm sure he's responsible for crimes. It's just this is the easiest position to get correct as a leftist, as an anti-imperialist. But look how the state of the U.S. left is, that they can't even get this right. I'll read a little bit more because this whole Ukraine segment is really good. If you were president right now, what will you do? What will you do? Will you have been able to avoid the conflict? Now, look at this answer. I don't know if I'll be able to. If I was president, I would have phoned Biden, Putin, Germany, Emmanuel Macron, because war is not the solution. I think the problem is if you don't try and don't fix things, you have to try. Now compare this to what the Social Democrats in Sweden and Norway is doing. Those psychopaths. Remember the first ever female leaders in Finland, right? The new progressive leader that they have. She is now a NATO clown trying to push Russia to World War III. She's not even trying to have peace talks. They're trying to join NATO, even though they already get security assurances as an EU state. So every other Western leader, every other quote-unquote progressive leader is going along, well, at least in the global north, right? Now compare that to how Africa and South America leftists are presenting this issue, compared to how U.S. leftists present this. But sorry, I need to stop ranting. Let me continue to read this passage. So, because I think this is a very last good part I'll read, and then I'll get your thoughts, Josana. This is where he called out U.S. hypocrisy. I sometimes get worried. I was very concerned when the U.S. and EU adopted Juan Guaido as president of the country in 2019. You don't play with democracy. For Guaido to be president, he will have to be elected. Bureaucracy can't substitute politics. In politics, it's two-headed states who are governing, both elected by the people, who have to sit down at the negotiation table and look at each other in the eye and talk. So that's him calling out the West for their hypocrisy. He's like, how can you talk about defending Ukraine as a sovereign state when you literally interfered in the sovereignty of Venezuela? So once again, even if you are to my right on this issue, Bernie Sanders and every single leftist should be able to articulate that hypocrisy. But not only do they not articulate it, Bernie Sanders, at least AOC, I think AOC more than Bernie on this issue, to be honest. AOC joins the Democratic caucus in destroying the sovereignty of Venezuela by backing Juan Guaido. So that's why I titled the video the way I did. Lula is making these progressives in the United States look like Ronald Reagan. Because on the imperialism issue, this is a big issue, not like a small disagreement. This is a big issue for our progressives in this country to be getting wrong. Now I'm gonna get to this part. I think this is the last part I want to share. This whole interview is really good, but I definitely want to read the Ukraine part. Actually, I think there's some more. This whole part is good. So, and now sometimes I sit and watch the president of Ukraine speaking on television, being applauded, getting a standing ovation by all the European parliamentarians. This guy is as responsible as Putin for the war. See, this is why I brought this article up, because the other articles cut it off after here. Because I'm like, bro, his rants are the best part. Don't cut it off. But anyway, he said, because in the war, there's not just one person guilty. Saddam Hussein was as guilty as Bush for the outbreak of the 2003 Iraq War, because Saddam Hussein could have said, you can come here and check, and I will prove that I do not have weapons of mass destruction. But he lied to his people. And now the president of Ukraine can say, come on, let's stop talking to him about this NATO business. Now, that last part, Lula, I don't agree with that one. Reading this again, I strongly don't agree with this part. Even if Saddam Hussein did everything the United States would have asked him to do, I think they still would have did Iraq, because it was a global strategy they started since the 90s, where they had a giant list of countries they planned on invading. And Iraq was one of them.
And Brazil was the third one in that list. So he's clowning right here, because like they also went in and there was no weapons of mass destruction. And
I see what Lula's trying to say though, but this part of the segment, I do strongly disagree with him. This point about Ukraine, I agree, because he said if Zelensky wanted to stop this invasion, he literally could have just said, "Hey, Putin, I'm done with NATO. I don't want to do NATO. We're not doing NATO. It's not happening." But he was doing the exact opposite. It was just floating like, "Yeah, we may join NATO." No, actually, the West floated was like, "Yeah, we may accept you as NATO." Then Zelensky was like, "Yeah, I think we should join NATO." How is that a smart idea if you didn't want your country to get in this conflict with Russia? But actually, so Al, everything he said in this segment, this part of our strongest, just because it's the dumb comparison I don't agree with. But I see what he's trying to say though. So I'll read his last part because I definitely want to read the part because this is when the reporter you can tell he started to get irritated. Because imagine the backlash that Bernie and AOC and the squad would get if they came after Zelensky this way. They give podcasters a ton of shit for calling out Zelensky. And you know, if their lips are quiet, I seen, just because I'm online a lot, I seen a lot of like liberals question Zelensky every once in a while. And then whenever they do that, they get a ton of hate. So, you know, Bernie and AOC playing politics because they won't do it because they know they would take a lot of shit if they criticize Zelensky. Now, compare that to what Lula is saying, though. So, this is when the reporter trying to defend Zelensky because this is when Lula called out Zelensky as the reason why this war is happening. So he said, so Zelensky should have talked to Putin more, even with 10,000, 100,000 Russian troops at his border. Pause. That's propaganda. They had 100,000 Russian troops at Russia's border. Like, you guys see how they present that? If you had troops on your border, that's your border. Look at the United States military bases.
The U.S. has robot dogs with guns on it and its borders. So I don't know what's the problem with it.
Yeah. So look at how he asks these questions, right? So he's trying to get, like, he ain't pushing back at Lula because he was trying to get Lula to only bash Putin. Lula pushed back on the NATO West narrative. Now he's like, shit, I gotta defend the West, bro. Or here's my career be over. So he said, so Zelensky should have talked to Putin more, even with 100,000 Russian troops at the border. So this question is implying that Zelensky shouldn't have done nothing. You guys see how crazy that position is? The position of these people, Zelensky should have done nothing to prevent this war. But anyway, let's read Lula's response. He said, I don't know the president of Ukraine, but his behavior is a bit weird. It seems like he's part of the spectacle. He is on television morning, noon, and night. He's in the UK Parliament, the German Parliament, the French Parliament, the Italian Parliament, as if he was waging a political campaign. He should be at the negotiating table. Guys, why is Bernie not saying this? Why is the U.S. left not saying this? Well, at least let me be clear, the boutique establishment left. Once again, every single one of the Progressive Caucus voted for this.
You have been saying it.
Yeah, so to be clear, just to be clear, RBN are allies and the people on the ground that are not supporting these scumbags of the real left. The institutionalized power in this country that's cosplayed to the left, they are all for this shit, and they sound like the exact opposite of what Lula and Black Agenda Report, the Black Alliance for Peace, stands on this. So it's not us who changed, it's the squad and Bernie who became imperialists. So let's look at this. You see how he's trying to defend Zelensky, the reporter? Can you really say that to Zelensky? He didn't win a war. It came to him. Now, this is when you really put the gas pedal down. He did want war. If he didn't want war, he could have negotiated a little more. That's it. I criticized Putin when I was in Mexico City, saying that it was a mistake to invade, but I don't think anyone is trying to help create peace. People are stimulating hate against Putin. That won't solve things. We need to reach an agreement, but people are encouraging war. You are encouraging Zelensky, and then he thinks he is the cherry on your cake when we should be having a serious conversation. Okay, you was a nice comedian, but let us not make war for you to show up on TV. And then we should say to Putin, you have a lot of weapons, but you do not need to use them on Ukraine. Let's talk. God damn. Tell me how you really feel.
This is a guy. This is coming from a guy that knows what he's talking about, right? Because, like, he was arrested to prevent him to run against Bolsonaro, okay, in the last election. the person from Fernando Haddad, the other person from the Workers' Party, lost for Bolsonaro because the boutique left from Brazil, that like Ciro Gomes, which is like a man that he has farms and he wants to sell the Amazon rainforest as much as Bolsonaro wants. The boutique left from Brazil, they went to Paris, like this guy went to Paris. So like we said, they went to Paris and Bolsonaro only won because the boutique left didn't go vote. So if you compare the numbers of Bolsonaro and Haddad, the difference is exactly the people that didn't vote because they were not happy with the Workers' Party. So the liberals. Lula now is making the liberals not only support, but vote for him. So he knows about having conversations with opposite sides. And he made an alliance with a now centrist that used to be right-winger since forever. He's going to be the vice president candidate.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. That's so fucked.
No, but he knows negotiation. This man, at least, in the very least, he knows negotiation.
So let me show you guys what the United States left seems not to be concerned with. Because I show you guys Lula's stance on Ukraine. And I am not exaggerating when I'm talking about the establishment boutique left. They are all on board of sending weapons to Ukraine. They are all for somehow defeating Putin when victory in this war is not possible. They are literally just extending this conflict in order to make money for weapon manufacturers who profit at a record high because of this conflict. So this is what a lot of people have been saying now. And apparently Bernie don't care about this, right? This is the DHS saying this. This is Joe Biden's DHS saying this. But Bernie can't say this. DHS concerned over Nazis returning to U.S. after fighting Ukraine. So, guys, I'm going to sum this article up because I already did a lot of reading this stream. So, essentially what they're saying is we send all these weapons to Ukraine. We give them all this training. We are training fucking Nazis because I saw someone in the comment. There are a lot of people in the far right in Brazil who are Nazi sympathizers as well who fight in Ukraine. There are a lot of American far-right Nazis who fight in Ukraine because remember what we explained when this conflict first started. Ukraine was always seen as a Nazi hub among Nazis. Like people in the United States, people in all across Europe, they will go to Ukraine like it's like fucking Israel. It's like their motherland. They know it's safe to be Nazis there. So when this war popped off, you had a lot of white nationalists in the United States who immediately went to fight for the Azov Battalion. A lot of far-right Nazis in Brazil immediately went to start fighting for the Azov Battalion. The amount of volunteer fighters they have is insane. So now we're going to train them, we're going to arm them, and then they're going to come back with military training.
I want to move out.
This is what the DHS is warning about. And now check this out. And then you can reply to this if you want, Josiah. You guys know friend of the show, Ryan Knight. Arms sent to Ukraine will end in criminal hands, said Interpol chief, which is obvious. There's already been reports of like javelins being found on the black market, people selling stingers and shit. This is what happened during the war on terror. People was like, yo, what's up with all these terrorist groups with U.S. weapons now? Remember how we always arm the people we end up fighting later? This is exactly what's going to happen. These arms about to end up in extremist white supremacist hands, and it's going to flood the black market. So isn't it funny? The liberals who are pushing for gun control, Josiah, they're pushing for gun control. Meanwhile, they're flooding Eastern Europe with guns. It doesn't get crazier than that. But Bernie and Nina Turner, everything's going to be all right. We're going to be all right. They don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck about this. That vote, like they did a lot of things, guys. You guys know all the criticisms I have of Bernie, AOC, and the squad. That vote was probably one of the most telling things. It's one of the most damning things. And no person in the working class, no anti-imperialist should ever vote for a Democrat ever again after that package. It was one of the greatest heists of the working class I have seen in a long time. But Josiah, I know you want to add in. I got some more shit after you get done.
Yeah, no, I just share. I just feel like it's boring to see like it's repeated like trying to dominate instead of coexist, and it's, I don't know what we can like. I think we need to do here inside like things in order to like let the world know that we don't agree with what is being done, that we are also in danger. I think like we have to recognize this too. I don't know, as Americans.
So there might be some people might be saying, man, Nick, you're being really hard on the U.S. left right now. Once again, I'm talking about the U.S. establishment left, right? The U.S. establishment left. Bernie Sanders, all the people that came from Bernie Sanders' campaign, you see them turn into Democratic Party operatives. They also became into the biggest cheerleaders for this war. So the gray zone, Aaron Monte, Max Blumenthal, they've been doing a good job debunking the Ukraine war narrative. So check this out. I saw this on timeline earlier. This is unbelievable. This is a former Bernie Sanders aide who is smearing the gray zone because they came out with this article, which is hilarious. And someone came out with this tweet summary of it, where the article was why the Ukraine proxy war matters for the left. It was written by a progressive shitlib, a former aide of the Bernie Sanders campaign, who was making the argument why the United States left and why the left all across the world should care about the Ukraine war and why we should fund it. So then they just smear a gray zone. So this is a Bernie Sanders aide smearing the gray zone because they are critical about the United States position on the Ukraine crisis. He said, with that said, it's important to differentiate between the genuine anti-war, anti-imperialism, DSA, and others in the American left, and the authoritarian agitprop of the gray zone and the like. The right's goal is to divide the left, and we should not help them. But the goal of building a stronger left is served by identifying, engaging, and organizing with those who genuinely acting on the principles of solidarity, democracy, and human rights, and not wasting time with atrocity-denying grifters and clickbaiting provocateurs. This is Bernie Sanders' aide smearing the gray zone as a tool that is meant to divide the left. They're dividing the left because they're calling out the lies on Russia, Ukraine. So guys, that's him smearing the gray zone, but it gets better because this is the article that he's quoting. This comes from Leftist News, friend of the show as well. This is the article. Why Ukraine matters for the left. So we're not going to read the whole thing. Here's the subheader. Opposition to U.S. adventurism is principled, but this is Putin's adventurism, and the left must stand firmly against it. See, once again, he's muddying the waters of this issue. This is about stopping NATO expansion and Western aggression and imperialism that has been constantly expanding, including military bases surrounding Russia. Broken agreements, broken treaties. Sweden and Finland breaking their treaties with Russia in the 90s. They did it over and over and over and over again, breaking these treaties. But that's not what the issue is about. Not about NATO. It's about this. So I'm not going to read the whole thread because he actually did a good breakdown. Did Leftist News. Here are some of the highlights of Matt Dutt's terrible article on the left in Ukraine. He starts off by praising the Biden administration, claiming they have made a strenuous and very public diplomatic effort to avert it. So the people who literally kept saying, even though they knew that Ukraine wasn't going to join NATO, they kept saying they knew they wasn't going to let Ukraine join NATO, but they was publicly saying, oh, well, I think there's a door for Ukraine to join NATO. So if they wasn't going to let Ukraine join NATO, why would they say that? The Biden administration and the United States as a whole, because not based on the presidents, right? The U.S. empire, right? So the U.S. was doing everything they can to probe Russia into this conflict, including arming the Nazis in the 2014 Maidan coup and backing the far-right extremists in Ukraine. So the article itself is already saying that, well, the Biden administration tried to prevent the war. Already wrong. So I'm asking you guys this question before I proceed. Why is there a Bernie Sanders aide doing apologizing for the Biden administration imperialism? It makes no sense. So anyway, let's continue. So anyway, this is just debunking it. Yes, the Ukraine war could have been prevented. I'm gonna read this tweet right here. Thus says that he is addressing leftist arguments in their strongest form. He is lying. Any article on Ukraine that missed the mention of the 2014 coup is just war propaganda. So he doesn't even mention the 2014 coup in this article. I would read the whole thing, but we'd be raging all day. So it's pretty much this whole article is just him giving apologetics, pretty much repeating state propaganda. So the reason why I bring this, I don't want to get too much to the article. I don't even want to prop the guy up. So the reason why I brought this up is you have Bernie Sanders aides smearing the left, and this is Benjamin Norton. We talking about Lula, guys. I didn't forget the main topic. So this guy, I showed you guys what Lula.
How do you tie this up to be? Who do you trace this back to? Like, let's do the follow the money. Who are we tracing this back to?
Just want to take over.
Help me. Like, you have to oh my God, Nick left me on the spot. I think we have to trace this back to, for who is it interesting? Who has this answer to me as an outsider in the comments? Who can we trace back to the fact that the left is being bought? How can we trace that? Like, treat me like I've never been to America before. Like, where are we tracing this back to? Like, I know the answer. I'm just being rhetorical.
Yeah, sorry. I literally had to get that. I had to get that personal business. But anyway, I'm gonna read this super chat. I'm gonna show you guys what Matt Duss said about Lula. I'll show you guys Lula's takes on Russia and Ukraine. Look at what he said. And he said, "Thank you for $10. How could Bernie hire someone like Matt Duss? Shame on you, Bernie." The same way, who's that? Fuck, I'm blanking on her name. Simone Sanders. The same way he hired someone like Simone Sanders. The same way he hired someone like Chuck Rocha, who's a grifter, who's a Democrat operative. The same reason he had Pramila Jayapal as a advisor of his campaign, when Pramila Jayapal was saying that we should take it easy. We shouldn't be criticizing Biden and the Democratic Party. That is what she was saying. There's a reason why Bernie make these bad hiring decisions, man. I'll beyond giving him benefit of the doubt. So let me get to the smear job that he did on Lula. And this was reported by Benjamin Norton. So I am showing you guys this because this is the guy that Bernie Sanders hired. This whole video is about you guys doing this comparison. And this is what Benjamin Norton said. In this absurd propaganda, Bernie Sanders advisor Matt Duss attacks Lula and cites Chile's liberal imperialist President Boric, who seemed to be a sad joke on the Latin American left. And then, guys, I'm not gonna pretend I know everything about Latin American politics, but all of my allies and comrades that like really invested in Latin American politics, like Josana, they've been telling me about Chile's neoliberal president. And I can't give you all the receipts, but based on what I heard, this guy is a piece of shit. But he quotes this guy.
He quoted. Sorry.
Yeah.
He co-opted leftist speech and to elect himself. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, after just 2 months in power, Boric did a 180 and sent the military to repress the Mbupe community. Wow. So this is his counterpoint. And let's see what he says. As a counterpoint to Lula's position, consider the stance of the neoliberal. He wrote that with a straight face. He said, Lula, I know you sound like you're making sense, but consider the neoliberal position. He said few countries in the world are more entitled to point the finger back at the U.S. than Chile, whose socialist president, yes, motherfucker, do you guys see what he just said? He said few countries in the world are more entitled to point the finger back at the U.S. So they explain how the U.S. overthrew their socialist president, which explains why no one in the South America, the global South or the left should trust U.S. because they are imperialists. They do not have your best interests at heart. Zelensky banned socialist leftist parties. Meanwhile, he kept the fascist white supremacist parties in place. Why would anyone believe allowing these These Nazis who've been emboldened to continue is beyond me. Guys, Al-Qaeda spread from Iraq. Now it was in Afghanistan, Syria, and all in Somalia and Ethiopia as well. Why do you guys think it spread? It spread because it was emboldened. So when the West send all these weapons to Nazis in the Ukraine, send them all this money, this is gonna grow the movement, the white supremacist movement in Eastern Europe that was already being reported on as being a problem. It's going to get worse because of this position. So what is even his argument? I'm skimming this. What's even his argument? Russia has opted for war. So he doesn't even debunk Lula here. He literally just saying, yo, Chile, they know they was victim of U.S. imperialism and they joined. That's literally what he's saying. Chile was a victim of U.S. imperialism and they know to join the United States bandwagon because they have a neoliberal U.S. puppet now. So why don't Lula just don't understand what Chile does? This is so stupid.
And I think it's so funny that like the least radical in my country here is way far radical than anybody here that claims to be a radical, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I said, Josan, too. And that's why I said at the beginning of the stream. This wasn't me to come down and say, yo, Lula's the greatest. He should be our leader. That's not the point of this stream, guys. As someone who's lived in the imperial core, a victim of the imperial core, I am showing you guys why I bash Bernie and AOC and the squad so much. We don't even have a suitable left in this country. Like, with all the criticism that you guys have of Lula, that Josana have of Lula, you see how much further he is from who Bernie, AOC, and them, who's considered the furthest left in this country? Do you guys see the difference? And I'm showing you guys the position of his aides. You guys see the position of the majority report, Vosh, who used to have Ukraine flags all over his profile. Like, not just Bernie. It's literally the entire boutique progressive media sphere and their allies. But Josan, do you have? I know I went for a while.
Just like observing what maybe for people in the U.S. is a strategy. Maybe you were propagandized and educated to think that your country going to other countries and invading it in many ways, physical war, sanctions, or just coup d'etats and whatever. Maybe you were taught that this is a behavior, right? Like not respecting the sovereignty of other countries. And I feel like, so you create the necessity of economic blocks because these countries need to defend themselves. And you see the BRICS, right? The BRICS, which is Russia, China, India, Brazil, and South Africa. And you see the attack on these countries and the urgency of separating that bloc. And it's just like the rest of the world, the global South, we start getting like more and more radicalized and more defensive and creating ways like Lula wants to create, right? He wants to do the Pan-American currency to fight the dollar. Gaddafi wanted petroleum to be charged in gold and then boof, lost his head. But yeah, Lula wants to do that.
And this is what, and you never see the U.S. left obviously question U.S. hegemony. They agree with it. And now you had, and this is Josana was joking with me, we were talking before, this shit's going to get Lula killed, guys. Because you guys see, we're going to talk about this here very soon. Our oligarchy purposely destroyed our economy, waging this new Cold War. Because they know, like, this Ukraine package is going to get funneled to their weapon manufacturer friends, right? They know they're going to be taken care of with Wall Street cash. So we are now living in late-stage capitalism where they know things are going to get worse. So now they're crashing the economy on purpose. And they made a giant miscalculation thinking that they're going to destroy Russian economy. They're going to put a chokehold on Putin. But the ruble is higher than it's ever been right now. And the American people are struggling and suffering because of this miscalculation the West has made. So the consequences of this miscalculation by the West cannot be understated, because now you have other people that like, maybe we should establish our own currency. Because if the United States and the West can just cut you off at any time just because there's a geopolitical disagreement, We need to start working on other alternatives before they randomly choose us, because we don't want to bow down to the West's interest. So this is why Lula might get his ass killed, because Lula proposes creating a Latin American currency to be freed of US dollar. Now, guys, Gaddafi was killed for saying the same shit, because Gaddafi wanted to create a pan-African community that had their own dollar that was free from U.S. influence. Lula is floating the idea of doing the same thing, having a pan-South Latin American alliance, so they don't have to be reliant on Western hegemony, especially in this time when you have South American countries that are electing socialist and leftist leaders at an extreme rate. Lula is like up 15 points against Bolsonaro, even though that race isn't over. But he is extremely, he's very high up in the polls. And the left has been getting wins in South America.
He would win. Like the elections in Brazil, or you have the first. So we have 44 parties, right? And the parties can make alliances, and then you can have all the alliances running. So you have a first round election. Usually from the first round that you have like, I don't know, 10, 20 candidates, you're going to have 2 for the second round. But Lula is seen to be winning the elections in the first round with like more than 20% difference from Bolsonaro. And Bolsonaro wants to overturn because we have electronic vote. And he wants to take that away because then it's easier to, to do his thing.
Now this, I gotta move on because there's another. I want to do another economic segment, so that's related to this. But once again, I'm not just picking just on Bernie. I'm not just using them as the only example. DSA on this issue has been beyond trash. DSA is. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, thank you for. I know Josana had to go to work. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Bye, everybody. Mwah. Love you all.
Thank you. Josana wasn't originally scheduled, but she is our Brazilian expert here, so she joined us on the fly. Thank you for joining us once again, Josana. So DSA pretty much is a group of socialists who their job is to sheep herd people to the Democratic Party. That is their entire mission statement. Their entire mission statement is, we are socialists who believe social change should happen through the Democratic Party. So the premise of the organization is already a joke. You guys want to see what their response to this has been? And by the way, I have noticed a lot of DSA people often have Ukraine flags in their Twitter profiles. Like, they are all for the Ukraine war psyop, the new Cold War. Now, check this out. Caitlin. This tweeted by Caitlin Johnstone, friend of the show, one of the greatest political writers of our time. I'm not joking. DSA meeting declares, war creates the possibility for a push of socialist ideas. War creates the possibility for a push of socialist ideas. At a recent panel event hosted by DSA chapter for the state of Maine, how do you say his name? He's a Ukrainian guy. Jesus Christ. What is that name? Sorry, I'm not trying. Sorry, that's mean. I probably shouldn't say that. But it's a Ukrainian guy. I can't even begin to say that name. So he's a leader of the Ukrainian left. He put forward a chilling perspective that the war creates a possibility for a push of socialist ideas in Ukraine. The panelists and DSA moderators stated their agreement with the speaker. What? I ain't gonna lie, guys. I probably gotta look into this, dude. Jesus fucking Christ. There's no way it happened like that. The panelists and the DSA moderators stated their agreement with the speaker and demanded the U.S. government deploy more tanks, missiles, and howitzers to wage war against Russia, regardless of risk of nuclear holocaust. So we have Bernie Sanders and the squad voting for weapons. DSA, the people who support them, they are cheering on this never-ending proxy war. If it goes the way they want it to go, this wouldn't end until all the Ukrainians died. They don't want peace because they don't want to give any geopolitical victory to Putin. You're not anti-war if you're anti-war only if it aligns with U.S. interests. I don't give a fuck about U.S. interests. I want war to end. And since I want war to end, even if it gives Putin a geopolitical victory, we need to negotiate to give him to end the conflict. And this me being anti-war is why I blame the U.S., the United States, NATO, and the West, just like Lula, because they are responsible for this war escalating to this point, and they started this by endorsing the 2014 Maidan coup. How is this a hard position for the left to get? How? How is this a hard position? So I think I'll get you guys. Let's see I didn't see this receipt. So I just saw the first receipt that Caitlin posted. So this is me. I'm gonna read this one. I actually didn't see this one. Let's see what this one says. Starodubstev got right to the point. The Ukrainian people have a right to fight. Left-wing people can support Ukrainian people to fight to be Ukrainians. You notice that these people who always say, oh, I stand with Ukrainians, they don't stand for the Eastern Ukrainians. They don't stand for the Russian-speaking Ukrainians. They don't give a fuck about the 14,000 Eastern Ukrainians that was shelled and been victim of multiple terrorist attacks by the Nazis in Western Ukraine. This is what kills me. People say I stand with Ukraine, but not all of it. That's what they're really saying. And if you stood with Ukraine, you want this conflict to end. Why do you give a fuck if NATO is in Ukraine, if the Ukrainian people are safe? And if Putin was lying about this war being about NATO, the global community, including anti-war movements, can handle it from there. But just like Lula said, there's been no indication whatsoever that Russia has been lying about their stated objective goal from day one, stopping the advancement of NATO and denazifying Ukraine. And when I said I was anti-fascist, I meant it. When I see the Azov Battalion being bombed, when I see them going away, you can rest in peace. Remember when the left used to say punch a Nazi? When it was about Trump supporters? But now they don't want the Azov Battalion to be disbanded? All these are peace options. So that's my rant. I only got one line into what this guy said at DSA. So let me continue the DSA quote. The Ukrainian people have a right to fight. Left-wing people can support the Ukrainian people to fight to be Ukrainian. That is Nazi rhetoric. You guys realize that is kind of what the Nazis in Ukraine says? I'm sorry to stop myself before I read the whole thing, but I cannot help it. So what the Azov Battalion, they are literally Nazis because they believe in one people, one country, and one state. So they started launching their attacks on Eastern Ukraine because they wanted to get rid and purge the Russian-speaking people. They want one country. So when they say we want Ukraine to be filled with Ukrainians, they want to get rid of Russian influence in the country because 1/3 of the country speak Russian, and they view Russia as this evil Asiatic horde that is not related to their Western European background. So him saying he support Ukrainian people to fight to be Ukraine, even though Ukraine has culturally always been a part of Russia, that's him conceding to Azov Battalion logic that they have a right to fight to get rid of the Russian scourge in their population. That's how I interpret it. Let me know in the comments if you guys agree or disagree with my analysis. I would love to learn more, but that's my take on this, right? So I will try to continue the rest of this. To support this fight, people need to voice their opinion for sending weapons to Ukraine and for limiting the military possibilities of the Russian regime. By pushing also for sanctions. Oh, Jesus. We got socialists calling for sanctions that will harm the working people of Russia and the sanctions that is harming the global working class as well. Jeez, this is DSA, guys. This is DSA. You guys saw the votes of Bernie Sanders in the squad. And that's the reason why I want to show you guys the position of Lula. Compare the position of Lula and Cuba in their response to this, and socialists in the global south compared to this nonsense that we have to deal with in the United States left that's propping up NATO, which has been an imperial power for colonization. They look at AFRICOM in the United States and what they did to Africa. These privileged white leftists don't give a fuck about freeing colonized people from the colonization power of the West and of NATO. They said here at the bottom, we should deliver weapons to Ukraine. So what is the point of you guys getting excited about more progressives getting elected into the Democratic Party? I'm very honest. I'm being like the Mickey Constant's running. This other DSA person who's supposed to be better than the Mickey's running. Okay, even the DSA candidate wins. Every single one of them gonna vote for weapons to Ukraine. John Fetterman, if he was a senator, would have voted for weapons to Ukraine. Nina Turner, she won. She will vote for weapons to Ukraine. All these progressives in the United States is for this insane, unhinged policy that will only hurt Americans.